Welcome everyone. Hi, how you doing? Great to have you here with me on the show. This episode, we're looking into the situation in Kosovo and whether it is potentially about to spiral out of control. Now, I'm going to try and do a bit of a deep dive on exactly what's going on. This is an issue that is extremely thorny. I have reported from Kosovo myself. I've also reported from Serbia and other countries in the Western Balkans. So I do have some knowledge and understanding of it, but I'm going to be speaking to people who are far more well-informed than I am. And that's kind of the point in this show, to take a look at exactly what's going on. And I'm also going to try and focus this show, this look into what's going on in Kosovo and the violence that we've seen over the last few days, in how the EU response can be tailored, what the United States role as well is in all of this, because it's really, really complex. It's really difficult. Please feel free to write your comments into the show. I can take a look at them as we're live, and I can bring them in and put them to the people that are speaking, the people that are going to join. They are Erjone Popova, who is a journalist in Kosovo, Una Hajdari, who is a journalist who covers the region extensively, and Toby Vogel, who's a proper expert, looking into exactly what's going on. So if you want to address any of them, please drop your comments in. You can also drop the comments in after if you're watching this not live. And I always respond and comment to everything that's going on. And you can also follow me on socials channels. My sort of name is up on the screen the whole way through, and you can drop me messages on Insta or Twitter, and we can have a discussion about this. As I say, I'm no expert in this, and I'm also not from Kosovo or Serbia. I have no dog in this fight, so I want to get to the truth and the understanding of what's going on, and where we are with what's happening. I'm gonna just do a little bit of a history lesson. I don't want to sort of teach anyone to suck eggs or say stupid things, but I think it's important to sort of look a bit at the context of exactly what's going on. And I suppose the first thing that's important to do, and I'm already a bit worried about this map because it's got some weird names on it and stuff, but it's just a geographical map. This isn't, maps are political, but I'm not trying to use this in any political way. And the map I want to show is just exactly where the geography of this is. As you can see, Kosovo is sort of down in the south of Serbia. It was part of the former Yugoslavia. It declared independence from Serbia back in 2008, following the 1998-1999 war. And the ethnic Albanians wanted to sort of break free from the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia at that time. Serbia doesn't recognize Kosovo as a country, and actually a lot of other countries in the world don't either. Russia and China, and 5 countries in the EU: Spain, Slovakia, Cyprus, Romania, and Greece. And that's actually really significant. It's significant because of who takes charge of the discussions in the EU at the moment, and who's in charge of that, because one of them is Slovakian and one of them is Spanish. So their national countries don't actually recognize Kosovo as an independent state. Over the last few months, years, we've seen a number of meetings. And just at the beginning of the month, we had a sort of a deal that was agreed between the Prime Minister of Albania, Albin Kurti, who you can see shaking hands with Joseph Borrell, who is the EU foreign policy chief, and who you can see now. And the other guy just there was Miroslav Lajcek, and he is from Slovakia. And in a minute, we should be able to see. This was a meeting that happened between the Serbians and the Serbian and the Kosovar leaders. This is Alexander Vučić, the president of Serbia, who is obviously a major player in this. And so they had this deal to kind of have some sort of cooling of the tensions that have existed over the last few years. There's been battles over number plates and the registration of Kosovar number plates crossing the borders, etc. There's been real complications. We'll go into that a little bit more with people who know a lot more about it. So this, at the beginning of the month, everyone was kind of okay. They didn't sign the deal, but they agreed the deal, and everything was kind of going okay. Now, at the beginning of this week, what we saw is violence erupting. In April, there was and local elections in one of the regions of Kosovo where ethnic Serbians live. Now, those ethnic Serbians were very unhappy. Ethnic Serbs, sorry, were very unhappy that the elections went ahead and that the government in Kosovo decided to give the ethnic Albanian mayors their jobs and put them into the municipal buildings. This created huge tensions. A police force from Kosovo went in to protect the buildings. Ethnic Serbs then started sort of creating violence outside of those buildings. They wanted to get in and get the ethnic Albanian mayors out. And in the process, NATO forces, NATO peacekeeping troops that are installed in Kosovo, many of them were injured. And this led to the NATO Secretary General announcing that there would be additional forces sent into the area. So let's take a look at what the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg had to say about this a bit earlier this week. Well, it was day before yesterday.
The unprovoked attacks against KFOR troops in northern Kosovo, which led to 30 peacekeepers being wounded. Such attacks are unacceptable and must stop. KFOR, the NATO forces, will take all necessary actions to maintain a safe and secure environment for all citizens in Kosovo. And we will continue to act impartially in line with our United Nations mandate. We have decided to deploy 700 more troops from the Operational Reserve Force for Western Balkans, and to put an additional battalion of reserve forces on higher readiness so they can also be deployed if needed. These are prudent steps to ensure that KFOR has the forces and capabilities it needs to fulfill its mandate. Violence sets back Kosovo and the entire region and puts Euro-Atlantic aspirations at risk. Both Pristina and Belgrade must take concrete steps to de-escalate the situation, refrain from further irresponsible behavior, and engage in the EU-facilitated dialogue, which is the only way to a lasting peace.
So that EU-facilitated dialogue was that video that I showed you earlier of the two leaders coming into Brussels, which is where I am and where they have these discussions. Now, the EU Foreign Policy Chief, Joseph Borrell, who's like in charge of doing those discussions, he released a statement which said that basically the Albanian, the ethnic Albanian side and the Kosovo government needs to, where is it? Needs to suspend the police operations focusing on the municipal buildings in north of Kosovo, and the violent protesters need to stand down. They're blaming both sides, and this is sort of relevant in this because it's important to see when it comes to Kosovo, there's always blame apportioned at what's going on. And we've just seen as well, I'm just going to bring in some other issues because Politico's been reporting that Albin Kurti, the Albanian Prime Minister, is saying that the US, which has reacted to this, I'll talk about that reaction with people that know a lot more about it than I do, that they've called the US reaction an overreaction. They've sort of withdrawn some military cooperation that was going forward. And there's this big European political community summit going on in Moldova today, kind of a nonsense summit of lots of different people, if you ask me. And the president of Serbia, Alexander Vučić, on his way in, said that the only way to de-escalate is for the alleged mayors, as he called them, to withdraw. And that's the only way. Albin Kurti as well said that there is a serious chance of escalation here. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it is significant. Often the Kosovo story hits the headlines and then really just drops out. But people I've been speaking to are worried about it. And that's exactly why I wanted to do the show about this week. Now, just for the viewers and people that have been joining the show over the weeks and commenting, please, if you're interested in a topic that you'd like me to cover, drop me a message online and let me know what interests you. I'm doing one show a week. Subscribe on the YouTube channel and notify yourself when it's going live. I want to talk about what everyone else is interested in talking about. I'm just choosing topics that I think are underreported and significant at the moment. So that's why I did this week. Now, without further ado, I want to get a picture from Kosovo from Erjone Popova, who is a good friend of mine and a wonderful journalist. I'm really, really happy that you've agreed to join the show. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. Too many developments here in Kosovo, so what can I say?
It's crazy days down there, right? Can you bring us up to date? Like, what is going on right now after that violence? What is the discussion? What's happening?
I mean, there are many developments. As I told you before the show, many things are happening from Friday in Kosovo. But the main thing that maybe we can start with is that U.S. said that Kosovo government, in this case, our Prime Minister Albin Kurti, was not coordinated with the U.S. about the things that happen in the northern part of Kosovo. And every time that I speak with internationals and my colleagues from abroad, most of the time is northern part of Kosovo who is the main topic that developments here never stop. And this is not a matter of rule of law, but this is a political issue who was also discussed on the dialogue. So it's all about Serbian community who lives there. There are majority, and they boycotted the election on April. And after that, there are three mayors that were elected from this election who are Albanians. And on Friday, they wanted to go to work, and there were many protests outside the buildings from ethnic Serbs who wanted to stop them. And
what's the situation at the municipal buildings right now? Are those mayors going into the office and still being protected by police?
As I told you, this is not a matter of rule of law. When we talk about northern part of Kosovo and four municipalities there who serve ethnic Serbs lives, it's always a political issue, and this political issue, it's the main topic we was and we is also discussing in the Brussels dialogue. It's not that they wanted to enter in and was a protest out there and there were clashes. It's because the was no coordination, as U.S. Ambassador Jeff Wovinier told journalists last day. They didn't know about these actions of Kosovo government on that part of our country. And on Friday, it was, let's say, more quiet because it was a rally in Serbia. Maybe you may know about that. Weekend was off for institutions. So on Monday, let's say, it started everything. And then was there were big clashes between KFOR troops who serve in Kosovo and protesters who are ethnic Serbs.
So this is it, but there's no standoff right now. Everyone's kind of at home. There's no barricades. So as we heard from Jens Stoltenberg, NATO, which obviously bombed Serbia in the 90s and has, like, everybody in Serbia just basically hates NATO, right? They are sending more troops into Kosovo. Yeah. What do people where you are think about this? And what do you think it could do to the relations with Serbia?
There were Stoltenberg said that they will bring in Kosovo 700 more troops, and they are ready to bring more if it's needed. So what is happening now in the northern part of Kosovo, these four municipalities, in fact, there are three, Zvečan, Zubin Potok, and Leposavić, is that the NATO peacekeepers are on the front line, let's say, and Kosovo police are inside the municipality. Municipal buildings. So the clashes are between ethnic Serbs and KFOR troops, peacekeepers who serve in Kosovo. So yeah, to be honest, there is some people here are not saying worry. Maybe it's not the right word, but there are many things that people are thinking, because we never were, let's say, in the fight with the US, and it's everything about US and Kosovo relations. It's not a big matter about NATO troops and KFOR troops. It's everything about the relations between Kosovo and US. And because sanction, if I can say, on the first punishment that US took for Kosovo, there were exercises for Europe Defender 2023, and US ambassador told us yesterday that these exercises are done for Kosovo. So there are thinking for other sanctions, and people are more worried about these relations, to be honest.
Exactly. So this is it. Kosovo gets tons of money from the United States, right? That's the truth of it. And so really has to toe the line often, as is often the case with money. But Albin Kurti seems to be kicking against the United States in this. What is going on there, and what do you think might happen? And what power do the Europeans have over the government in Pristina, in Kosovo?
I don't want to be rude, but
be rude.
I want to be totally honest. Kosovars, and when I say Kosovars, I mean Albanians, who are majority doesn't care about European Union, and they don't have a very big impact in Kosovo to people and to Kosovo politics. When we talk about US, is another story. We are thankful for the NATO bombing and for our independence and everything. The people here think that, and in fact it's like that this country was built because of the US help. And if you, let's say, try to be against them, it's a very big issue in Kosovo. And Albin Kurti, with not coordinating with the US and the US ambassador here, made to have many reaction from the White House and the people who lives here in Kosovo. So this is the biggest worry in Kosovo. And when we talk about European Union, it's not that they have a huge impact on what is happening, and it's not that it's pretty much discussed here in Kosovo.
Are people worried that these kind of scenes are going to seriously escalate into something that is dangerous and, you know, much worse? Because there's recent history of that in your country.
Yeah, yes, people are worried. And when I say people, I mean Albanians who live here, because when we talk about Serb majority, it's very difficult for us as an Albanian journalist to talk to them, because mostly they don't speak to Albanian journalists. But people are worried, and there are, let's say, two groups or two opinions here in Kosovo. First, who said that Albin Kurti is wrong and he has to stop doing this, and he has to coordinate with the US, and he has to do everything what it's an, let's say, US request. And there is another part who are voters of Albin Kurti, most of them, but the people who are with him, who support him, but they think, some of them, that he is making tactics somehow because of the dialogue which is ongoing. So in total, yeah, there is a big worry in Kosovo.
Yeah, it's really, really worrying. Erjone, stay there. I'm going to bring in Una Hajdari, who is another friend, and I'm so happy she's making the time to join the show. It's great to see you, Una. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you perfectly. Yeah. So
hi,
I wanted...
And hi, Erjone, as well.
Hey.
I mean, you follow this stuff super intensively as well, and you know as well the history of all of this. I mean, this kind of doesn't come out of the blue, right? This isn't some... Albin Kurti, when he said, right, put those ethnic Albanian mayors into those municipalities, he knew that a reaction was to be expected, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's since 1999, almost no action conducted, no decision, not a single decision that was made by the government in Pristina involving the Serb majority North municipality, so the area in Kosovo in which all of this is happening. It never happened. I mean, when anytime Pristina did something unilaterally without the explicit approval of NATO or the EU, and ended up like this. And this is largely because those areas continue to resist any kind of full incorporation within the Kosovo institutional structures. Over the years, they've been more incorporated. They've been like semi-incorporated at various points. Right now is possibly one of those times when things are very bad and when there's little to no coordination between local Serb representatives and those in Pristina. So obviously he knew that this would lead to some kind of reaction, perhaps not at the scale, but tensions have been simmering in the country since July of last year, almost the whole time. There might have been a short respite sometime in January when things calmed down. So this was expected. And the other thing that's really important to keep in mind is that this comes at a time where Kurti is becoming more confrontational with Western nations. He's done this in the past, and it's actually in many ways his political trademark. He, unlike previous Kosovo leaders, he has liked to represent Kosovo as a sovereign unity and state that can act on its own and not have to, coordinate every single action that it does with the West. And this is an example of that, except that now he's acting, perhaps he's additionally angered by the fact that the agreement that was supposed to be signed between Kosovo and Serbia, this was much lauded, much talked about, very hotly debated agreement, which would contain the most significant concessions to Kosovo's statehood achieved so far, ended up not actually being signed by the two sides. Just to briefly recap that, they decided on an agreement. Both sides agreed to the content, but it was never officially signed. And so now it's unclear as to how it'll be implemented. The agreement has been incorporated into the EU integration paths of the two countries. So that makes it act out more.
I mean, it was kind of, I don't want to be too critical, but it was a bit of a joke, right? Like, to agree a deal without signing, everyone went home. It was just like, okay, great. Like, here's your party bag at the end of that meeting. It really wasn't much. Erjone, I want to bring you in on this just quickly, because Albin Kurti was prime minister, then he, wasn't prime minister. He's not politically massively strong in Kosovo right now, is he? Is he able to make these kind of decisions? Can you bring us up to date on that?
I mean, he won more than 50% of the votes in Kosovo. So he's strong, let's say, because of votes he has, but he's not strong enough to be confronted with the US and the European Union. So that's the main thing and the biggest discussion here in Pristina. So none of our prime minister until now were saying against US, then those who were like, let's say, Una Hajdari and others saw the sequences that Kurti saw these days. So it's everything about being coordinated, and this is what is asked here in Pristina. US ambassador told our Albanian journalist 2 days before that he didn't have any idea about the intervention, if I can say, in the north on Friday. So what they are asking from Kurti is to be coordinated with them, and as he said, no surprise. So I can't predict his actions, to be honest. He's unpredictable as a person.
Predicting Western Balkan politics is a fool's game. I wouldn't try and do that. Erjone, I really, really appreciate you joining the show today. I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for being with me and giving us your insights. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck.
So back to you though, Una. So what do you predict is going to happen now? How can there be some resolution to this? It's kind of frozen at the moment after what's happened, right?
Well, Erjone rightfully emphasized the fact that anytime the US is perceived as punishing Kosovo or turning against its current leaders, that doesn't resonate very positively amongst the population. Kosovo doesn't have that many powerful allies, or allies as powerful as the U.S. That being said, there aren't that many countries that are more powerful than the U.S. So, but it is its main ally in the world. There aren't that many European countries that it has a strong relationship the way it does with the United States. And so, anytime the U.S. come off as being angry, let's say, to put it casually, with Kosovo, then this resonates badly. I do expect Kurti to back down in some way or another, but as witnessed last year, when, if you recall, there were these tensions in relation to the license plates issue. And I'm not going to get into the details of explaining that because that'll take up
No,
the
I wouldn't mind if you do. I wouldn't mind. I was going to ask you to do that, actually. If you could just give a little, snapshot idea of what happened with the license plates and why it is, if I dare say, sort of symbolic and sort of the kind of whole issue between the two countries.
Yeah. Well, anytime there's a crisis in Kosovo and it gets reported on internationally, obviously the big supranational players are mentioned: U.S., the UN, NATO, the EU, obviously as well. But most of these conflicts, most of the tensions that have arisen the last couple of months have come out of very seemingly banal and benign issues. Last year, Serbian political leaders, so we're talking about mayors, MEPs, ministers, pulled out of the Kosovo institutions, or started boycotting the Kosovo institutions after Prime Minister Kurti insisted that all those who had Serbian license plates change them to Kosovo ones. And by Serbian license plates, I don't mean the ones issued for cities that are in Serbia, like Belgrade or Novi Sad or Niš. Serbia continues to this day. I mean, it's been halted at this point, but last year it was still issuing license plates for cities that are found within Kosovo, because Serbia doesn't recognize Kosovo's independence. So there are license plates for Kosovo cities like Mitrovica, Leposavić, Zubin Potok, and so on and so forth, places in the north of the country. So Kurti wanted people to get rid of these and to get Kosovo ones. However, it blew up, and again, in the echo of what's going on in Ukraine, any escalation of tensions in Kosovo is taken much more seriously. So this is why it ended up being such a big international issue, or an issue that was discussed internationally. And it's a similar. I mean, we're facing a similar situation right now. In any other context, nobody would really care about local mayors in Kosovo.
Let's just talk quickly about Serbia. Alexander Vučić it doesn't seem to matter. I mean, it kind of plays into his hands a little bit, this stuff, doesn't it? This is. I don't want to sort of accuse him of anything, but it's what he wants to see, this kind of violence on municipal buildings, isn't it?
Well, one comparison that is fair when it comes to, I think many of the comparisons between the Russia-Ukraine situation and the Kosovo-Serbia situation are overblown, but one that is fair is that Kosovo has a strong symbolic and historical importance amongst especially nationalists in Serbia, and the current president could definitely be considered one. And so for him, anytime this really hot button issue, boils up again, he gets a free sort of talking point that he can then project discuss endlessly with the public and avoid talking about other issues that are affecting the country. As you know, the rallies and the protests rallies and protests happening all over Serbia, or that have been happening over the past couple of weeks after the tragic shooting at a local school. And this is something, the shooting, while almost entirely unrelated to Vučić, has been the single biggest contributor to a dip in his popularity. So he's happy to be able to distract from that tragedy and the reactions to it with something that's going on in Kosovo, where he controls the narrative much better. He has a very strong relationship with a local, if not, I think I'm being generous by just calling it a strong relationship. Others would use harsher terms, but with the local Serbian representatives in Kosovo. And so he can control their actions much more than he can do with let's say, the Serbian opposition in Belgrade who are protesting. So beneficial for him on all sides.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Serbian sort of narrative is always sort of swings back to Kosovo, and it sort of just works for him because it's that nationalist dog whistle that he can use. I'm going to bring in Una, Toby Vogel. Really, really appreciate you being with us, the founder of Democratization Policy Council and a proper expert on Western Balkans issues. Toby, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jack. And hi, Una.
It's really good to see you. I just want to, I mean, I know you've been talking, I've already seen you've been talking online about the American reaction. Can you talk us through what the Americans have done in the wake of this violence in northern Kosovo and what your read on it is, this Defender 23 program?
Well, it's really been quite extraordinary. It's not just Defender 23. Within a very short time of the violence erupting, and by the way, we should maybe also make a bit more of a distinction between what happened on Friday initially and what happened on Monday, because I think there is a level of genuine grassroots anger among the Serbian communities in Kosovo, not necessarily only against Pristina, but against Belgrade as well. But that got hijacked clearly on Monday, and it was on Monday when this really got violent. So within minutes of the mayors being escorted, there were all these reactions coming in, calls for restraint, and so on and so forth. And what's really extraordinary is the very thinly veiled threat to essentially cut Kosovo off from the Americans. So no support for membership in international organizations. Kosovo is currently in the process of joining the Council of Europe. That has angered Serbia, which voted against, which in turn was in and of itself a violation of the agreement that we mentioned, that we talked about earlier on the show. But also,
I've lost your audio here. I don't know if I can't hear you there. I don't know if you've got some wireless. Yeah, sometimes those things can disconnect. I'll bring in Una. Well, if you just try and disconnect yourself and reconnect your audio, that'd be great, Toby, and we'll pick up. I wonder if you can pick up a little bit on what Toby was saying. I don't know. I know you'll probably have some comments on that.
Yeah, he rightfully emphasized the speed with which the U.S. and other Western allies reacted. It's interesting because Kosovo is such a strong supporter of the United States and other Western countries that are, have mandates. So let's remember that the UN still has a mandate in Kosovo, a special mission there. The EU does as well, especially now with their police force in the north. NATO has their peacekeepers, which we've all seen sort of get in between. And so it's interesting that Kosovo, there seems to be an impression on the ground in Kosovo that the West, if they're going to criticize someone, that it's easier for them to criticize Kosovo because Kosovo will likely forgive them a lot more easier if they get criticized by the US. Yeah. I feel that for most of them, getting for folks in Serbia and for their government in Serbia, if they are criticized by the United States, Western support is on thin ice in Serbia in many circles already. So getting criticized by the US would be criticizing Serbia is much harder. So in terms of their thinking on this, I think they just wagered that it would be a lot easier to criticize Kosovo than Serbia in this situation.
I mean, the government in Belgrade is sort of famous for picking, like hearing something it doesn't want to hear from one place and swinging to the other side, that other side often being Russia, and just sort of not really, just sort of playing in the middle, I mean, Alexander Vucic seems to be very happy in that situation, sort of not pinning himself to one flagpole too strongly. Toby, let's see if we can bring you back in and you can pick up and carry on where you were, if we can hear you.
Yes, indeed. I lost you there a little bit as
well. We've lost your audio. It's gone again. See if maybe if you can take the headphones out and just do it on the normal thing, because I want to hear what you have to say. One of the questions I want to ask though, and I wanted to ask this to Toby. I don't know if maybe I'll ask you Una, and I'd like to hear Toby's point as well. Have we got you, Toby?
I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, we've got you. That's fine.
Excellent.
There we go. Carry on. Please pick up where you left off.
No, I mean, long story short, I think the US pressure has really been quite extraordinary and quite one-sided. So you have a situation where you have dozens of NATO troops injured by, frankly, organized or semi-organized gangs that are clearly, acting on the behest, if not the direction, of Alexander Vučić, and you criticize the people that they're attacking. That is an extraordinary situation. Now, what I heard Una saying, I fully agree with. I mean, Kosovo is the weaker side in this. Kosovo has more to lose. Kosovo needs Washington much more, and Washington's support, and not to mention Brussels, is far more contingent, I suppose, on quote unquote good behavior on the part of Pristina. And there is a palpable irritation. I feel it mostly in Brussels because I am in Brussels, but you can feel it in Washington as well, that Albin Kurti is, let me look for a diplomatic term.
Don't be diplomatic. Don't be diplomatic. Say it as you feel.
He can be quite stubborn on what he believes is right. And we can have a long discussion whether that's politically smart. But that's not even really the point. The point is that whatever he does, I think he's fighting an uphill battle now, regaining the support of the Americans and to some extent the Europeans. Although I think, frankly, probably has given up on the support of the Europeans because
Do you think he cares? This is it. I mean, Kosovo wants independence. They don't. I mean, I've met Albin Kurti. I've interviewed him before, and the message that and the sense that I've always got from him is like, we don't want to just sort of get independence from Serbia. We want to be an independent, sovereign country making our own decisions. And I mean, fair enough if you are that politician leading that charge, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Albin Kurti is actually a very interesting political figure, politically speaking, in the Western Balkans, probably unique in that he has a very strong sort of, ideological agenda. He is a left-wing populist, if you will. Does he need the United States? Yes, he does need the United States. I mean, Kosovo needs the United States, regardless of who's in power in Pristina. So I think, anything that upsets the United States is going to make things considerably more complicated. But the problem is that the United States itself seems to have shifted in recent months, shifted away really from its support of non-nationalist forces in Bosnia, Herzegovina, for example, and really pivoted full on to behind Alexander Vučić. And the Europeans have followed to a large degree.
Do you think that's because Vučić has sort of won the elections and, feels like he's staying a bit longer? Or what's your understanding for the reason of that more?
Well, you see, the whole narrative, the whole idea, the whole process of EU integration really has ground to a halt, and it was sort of artificially reanimated by the EU's giving Ukraine candidate status and Moldova and Georgia. But in terms of the Western Balkans, it is quite hopelessly stuck, and the EU doesn't have another strategy for the region. Now, this combines with a sense on the part of the Americans are frustrated by this. The Americans feel that the Europeans are not doing a good job managing, especially security challenges in the Western Balkans. And they would like the Europeans to do that so that the US, can essentially get out. I don't mean, fully disengage, but not having...
Eventually they want to be out, right? That's the thing. It doesn't...
they want to do business. They want to build highways and stuff like that. They want to buy factories and stuff like that. But they don't want to have to maintain, a large troop presence. They don't want to have these problems that keep raising their heads. And so they would really like to hand this off to the Europeans. And the Europeans initially, I'm talking about years ago, were quite eager to take that role. But now they're stuck with it, and they don't like it. They especially don't like having anything to do with military force, because it runs counter, I think, to the EU's sort of self-image as a peace project.
Well, I mean, the European Peace
That's a
Facility
different conversation.
is now about creating weapons and buying up weapons,
Yes,
right? I mean,
correct, but that's a very different situation, and it's not EU troops who have to actually apply violence. Whereas in Bosnia, if the situation exploded tomorrow, it would be down to EU troops, to Hungarians and Austrians and what have you.
Una, I'm going to bring you in here. This is something that perhaps isn't talked about. I mean, in everything I've read, isn't talked about too much. But the Russian influence here, specifically related to what's happened in Kosovo in the last week or so, do you think there's a sort of hand of Moscow in any of this? I mean, I'm loath to ask the question. I have zero proof of it, but there's always a suggestion in that region. I mean, Russia has interest down in Kosovo and Serbia. What do you think?
Well, whether or not Russia nudged the situation in a certain direction or not, it's definitely benefiting from it. Russia benefits when, at the moment where it's trying to convince the world that it's waging war in Ukraine because of NATO expansion. NATO troops are the ones who are getting in between Kosovo Albanians and Kosovo Serbs on the ground in the Balkans. So it helps Russia in every way possible. The crucial point here, which I think ties into what we talked about when Toby talked about when it comes to like U.S. support, is that Russia is the biggest barrier to Kosovo's independence in international Kosovo's independence, for the recognition of it in international organizations. One of the reasons why, and this isn't officially mentioned except for a couple of statements from Vučić, but one of the reasons why Serbia didn't want to sign the agreement in North Macedonia, where they were meeting, the two sides were meeting, is because it included a condition that Serbia would not intervene in Kosovo's membership in international organizations. One of the international organizations that would solidify Kosovo's existence is the UN, and of course the big bloc there continues to be, or the big opponent to Kosovo's independence, along with China, of course, but continues to be Russia. The Council of Europe, then Russia not being, is a great example of how Kosovo's membership does work in organizations that Russia has been kicked out of. So they benefit from any kind of proof that Kosovo is not functioning as a country, that it's not functioning as an independent state and government, or anytime it's perceived as taking the wrong decisions or acting out against minorities. I mean, there are 100 sort of mirrors of arguments that are made regarding Ukraine, that Russia makes regarding Ukraine every day, that could be applied to the Kosovo-Serbia situation. So it benefits from it. I don't think there are people on the ground. I don't think Serbia needs it. Sadly, in Kosovo, you can cause a lot of damage with a very small number of people. And even though there were a significant number of protesters in North Kosovo the last couple of days, that doesn't mean that it was funded by Russia, but Russia definitely does benefit from it.
This is it. Moving to you, Toby. I mean, there's the Europeans especially don't have much bandwidth to deal with this, especially if it gets much worse. Does that mean that the situation is more dangerous, or does it mean that the situation remains more sort of focused regionally? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know if you agree with that, with what I'm saying.
This bandwidth thing is something that I keep hearing here. And I'm just struggling with it, because I mean, it's not as if all the Kosovo desk officers in the Commission Directorate for the Neighborhood and Enlargement are all of a sudden doing Ukraine.
This is always what I think as well. I really mean this. When it comes to Brussels, I'm like, there's a lot of you.
There's a bureaucracy that's rumbling on. I mean, if the Commission is able to deal with a large number of competition cases every day and to conclude trade agreements every day and do all of that stuff, why isn't it able to deal with Kosovo or to deal with Bosnia or any of the other outstanding issues in the Balkans? So I would question the premise, but I know what you mean. And I think politically, certainly it's true. It's true for the very top. of the policy machine in this town. But frankly, the Balkans has been off the radar screen for probably about 15 years. There was this idea that we start we give candidate status to all these countries, we start negotiations, and then sort of things will just take their course, and we'll eventually somehow deal with Kosovo through this EU-facilitated dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade. And that has not worked out. The dialogue has been going on for over a decade with very thin results. The last result was this agreement, this bizarre agreement that we talked about before, that was agreed but not signed, but then it wasn't even agreed, and then there was an implementation agreement, but it's not clear whether that was agreed, and so on.
As EU as it ever gets, but actually not
process
signed.
Absolutely, process over outcome. And the Europeans are happy as long as there's a process, because it liberates them from having to ask the hard question of why isn't this working? Why are we? Think about it.
Why isn't it working, Toby? Why isn't it? Is it Borrell being Spanish, not really being in favor of Kosovo independence anyway? Is it Lajcak not really not doing his legwork? Is it just an impossible situation that can't be solved by the Europeans?
I don't think it's an impossible situation that can't be solved by the Europeans or anyone else. I think it is solvable, but it requires skill. I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think it's a problem of Borrell and Lajcak primarily, but of course, whoever thought that putting two diplomats from non-recognizing countries, which after that are a tiny minority inside the EU, of putting them in charge of this process, I don't know what they were on, but it wasn't a good decision. Having said that, why isn't it working? I think for a number of reasons. One reason is that the pull of membership, the attractiveness of membership, obviously has greatly faded over the years as it became more and more distant. If you talk to Kosovo officials, I mean, EU integration is really just not anywhere near. It's probably not even among the top 10 issues for them. It just
that's what Erjone was saying as well. Like, they don't care.
Yeah.
It's just not hitting headlines. It's not written about. It's not talked about on TV. They don't care.
Yeah, and think about it. I mean, it's going to be 20 years since the EU first made the promise of, if you meet all the conditions, we will let you in, at Thessaloniki in 2020 and in 2003. 20 years. It will be another, I don't know how many years, and I don't want to make a prediction, but I'd be surprised if Kosovo joined in my lifetime. I don't think they're going to join at all.
I mean, but Macron's speech yesterday was all about getting new countries in. It's a bizarre speech from him. I mean, I don't want to do this. EU accession in the Western Balkans is a whole show in itself, especially when we look at Albania and North Macedonia. But this is it. Like you say, it's not this sort of ripe fruit that they can dangle. So I suppose the question, to sort of start wrapping this up, what can be done? What levers does the EU have to prevent the situation that's going on there right now getting more dangerous? I'll ask both of you, but I'll start with you, Toby.
Well, there's the micro level, the immediate level, and the immediate challenge, and there's the broader issue. I think I'm less worried actually about the immediate situation. I think there is a way to back down. I think Prime Minister Kurti has alluded to the possibility of new elections. That, of course, will presuppose that the Belgrade-aligned Serbian politicians don't boycott, because that was the part why they had Albanian mayors in the first place. But this is solvable. This is not, it might be quite difficult, challenging, but it's solvable. Some kind of compromise. But that doesn't really resolve the bigger question. And the bigger question is that of relationship between Kosovo and Serbia, and by extension between Kosovo and the wider world. And that is of course much more complicated and requires skill and a certain political vision and a political will. And I think that's where where what you said about, we can't chew gum and walk at the same time, where that kicks in, because that just isn't around in Brussels or in the member states. I don't see any European leader now with Merkel gone who would be willing to pick up the phone and call Vučić and tell him to back down. It's not about Vučić, but that's the sort of engagement that you would need, and I don't really see that happening.
Focus and leadership are what are required. Toby, thanks so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. So, Una, I know you want to talk. I know that you have some opinions as well about the US Embassy in Belgrade and what's going on there and what influence or shifts are happening there.
Yeah, I mean, when the current U.S. ambassador to Belgrade, Christopher Hill, is one of the most experienced Balkan diplomats to spend time in the Balkans lately. When he was assigned to the role, this was considered to be sort of a big, move on the side of the Biden administration in terms of, showing that they are interested in sending big players to the region. In the meantime, he's been criticized by independent voices in the country, but also in the region, for being a little soft on Vučić, on the Serbian government in general, and events in the region, and Serbia's role in events in the region. Bear in mind that during the 90s, when Hill was initially in the Balkans, the U.S. was the main peacekeeper, or the main interlocutor between intermediary between the different sides, and this doesn't seem to be the case. And analysts on the ground and people who've talked about this to the embassy off the record see that there's an indication on the U.S. side that currently the number one priority is to get Serbia out of Russia's orbit long term. And there was always U.S. involvement in this direction over the years, but it wasn't a firm goal or something where they were putting all their efforts in. And this is the actions of the U.S. Embassy in Belgrade, but also the reactions to what's going on in Kosovo are a strong indicator of that they, with everything that's going on in Ukraine, they just don't want to have, and echoing what Toby said earlier, they just don't want to have this problem anymore. And the shortest path to solving this problem, according to some people in the U.S. Administration, is to get Serbia completely and or largely out of Russia's orbit or sphere of influence.
It's a very complicated and difficult project. I mean, this is it. We've seen the US change their officials there. There was Richard Grenell, who was down in the Western Balkans, who was a Trump official and did some kind of mad stuff, but didn't cause too many problems. I mean, how important are those US figures? How important is it, the person that that DC puts into these roles in covering this issue?
Yeah, well, you and Toby talked at length about the inability of the EU to act decisively in the region, and the US have always been the doers when it comes to the Balkans, going back to the 90s. So where the EU has been involved in this high-level dialogue, I mean, the agreement that we kept mentioning today was initially supposed to be something that was going to happen within the framework of the EU negotiations between Kosovo and Serbia, or the talks that were facilitated by the EU. But then when they only sort of really caught everyone's attention, the US started championing for them much more intensely. And so this is sadly what we're facing right now. A lack of EU decisiveness or interest in the Balkans will basically mean that it slips out of everyone's orbit of interest and stuff like that. Grenell and the Trump administration were controversial. I mean, Kurti, I think this could be even the Trump, just to briefly recap, Trump's sort of envoy. He was ambassador to Germany, but he was an envoy for the Western Balkans. Richard Grenell, very typical sort of newer generation Republican, what I think most of the U.S. press are now calling MAGA Republican, which has since been working closely as an advisor to the Serbian government. He was sort of tasked with solving the issue as well, and Trump wanted to sort of wrap the Kosovo-Serbia issue, but also wrap it into his series of agreements that have been signed between, as you know, several Middle Eastern countries, but also Kosovo, and make himself seem like a big, negotiator, problem solver in the international sphere. So yeah,
but this, I mean,
really mess things up because Kurti blames that government for the Trump government and Grenell for single-handedly bringing him down. And since it happened, there are politicians who were against Kurti in early 2020 who do admit that they were pressured by the U.S. to vote, to bring Kurti down and bring his first government down.
It's just, honestly, Una, you're such a good journalist. I love talking to you, and there's so much more that we could touch on. But I think, in the interest of time, we'll leave it there and wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining this show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure speaking to you, Jack.
Yeah, it was awesome. I can't wait to see you soon and for a catch up. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. And so with that, we'll leave it. I mean, I think we've touched on many of the issues, or a lot of the issues, and I've tried to keep it quite current and I've tried to keep it quite relevant. I know that these issues can be quite high politics and dirty politics as well sometimes. I know a lot of people watch this show after the fact, after it's live, so please feel free to drop your comments in. Like I say, I get back to all of them, and I keep following the discussion that happens online. So please do that. And also, if you watch the stream live on Twitter, then please subscribe on the link on YouTube. It means that you can get notified about the shows that I'm doing weekly. Feel free to drop me a message, as I said earlier, about topics that you'd like me to cover. I try and keep everything centered in Brussels politics, at least things that happen that affect Brussels or that the EU has a sort of hand in, and that's why this one's slightly more off patch, but obviously with the EU influence there, it's really important. And if there's anything you'd like me to cover, like I say, get in touch. I'd love your views. Thanks so much to everyone that has watched, everyone that's joined live online and watches later on. As I said, subscribe to the channel and have a wonderful rest of your day.